Rome. The name itself speaks of power, glory, and perfection. We imagine a flawless empire, an unstoppable machine. We're told its greatest emperor, Trajan, expanded this empire to its absolute peak. We're taught that his victory over Dacia was Rome's finest hour. But what if that's a lie? A beautiful, shining lie. Hidden behind the glorious tales of victory is a nightmare. A campaign so brutal, it nearly broke the empire's most elite soldiers. It was a story of betrayal, of a fatal mistake, and of a proud king who refused to ever be a slave. This isn't the story of Rome's greatest triumph. This is the story of its closest brush with total disaster. This is the real story, the truth of Trajan's Dacian Wars. To truly understand the Dacian Wars, you have to understand the two men who fought them. On one side, you have the Roman Emperor Trajan. He was the perfect Roman leader, a skilled soldier, a visionary builder, and absolutely adored by his people. His motivation was pure ambition. Trajan believed Rome was destined to rule the known world, and Dacia was the last major piece of the European puzzle. On the other side, King Decebalus of Dacia. History often paints him as a simple barbarian. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Decebalus was a brilliant strategist, a master politician, and a leader who inspired fierce loyalty. His motivation? Freedom. Dacia was a small mountain kingdom, but it was incredibly rich in gold. This wealth made it a tempting target, but it also gave Decebalus the resources to defend his homeland. For years, these two giants circled each other. Previous Roman Emperor Domitian had tried and failed to conquer Dacia. That war was a complete disaster for Rome, forcing them into the humiliating position of paying Decebalus for peace. For a proud military man like Trajan, this was an insult that could not stand. He wouldn't pay for peace. He would take it by force. The decision was made, it would be total war. And this was Trajan's first and perhaps greatest mistake. He saw a small kingdom of so-called barbarians, not a nation of warriors willing to die for their freedom. In the year 101 AD, the Roman Empire, a behemoth of military and engineering might, set its sights on a new prize, the Kingdom of Dacia. This land, rich in gold and silver, corresponding roughly to modern-day Romania, was ruled by a formidable and cunning king named Decebalus. He had already humiliated Rome once before, forcing the Emperor Domitian to pay tribute to keep the peace. But now, a new emperor sat on the throne. A soldier emperor named Trajan, and he was not the type to pay anyone for peace. For Trajan, honor and conquest were everything. The stage was set for one of antiquity's most epic and brutal conflicts, the Dacian Wars. Trajan's preparations were meticulous. He wasn't just planning an invasion, he was planning to absorb Dacia into the empire. He gathered a colossal army, nearly 150,000 strong, composed of veteran legions, auxiliary troops, and specialized units from across the Roman world. This wasn't just a punitive expedition, it was a force of subjugation. In the spring of 101 AD, this massive war machine crossed the Danube River, the traditional frontier of the empire, and plunged into the rugged, heavily forested terrain of Dacia. The initial Roman advance was a testament to their legendary engineering skill. Roman soldiers weren't just fighters, they were builders. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, they built roads, forts, and supply depots, creating a logistical network that allowed them to operate far from home. Their goal was the heart of the Dacian kingdom, the capital, Sarmizegeса Regia, a fortress complex nestled high in the Orasti Mountains. But King Decebalus was no fool. He knew he couldn't defeat the Roman legions in a conventional pitched battle. His army, though fierce and brave, was smaller and less equipped. So, he turned the land itself into a weapon. The Dacians were masters of guerrilla warfare. They used the dense forests and treacherous mountains to their advantage, launching sudden, vicious ambushes on Roman columns and supply lines. They would strike like lightning and melt back into the woods, leaving death and confusion in their wake. The Romans, accustomed to fighting on open plains, found this new kind of war deeply unsettling. The Dacian warriors, with their distinctive curved swords called the falx, were terrifying opponents. This weapon could hook around shields and deliver devastating blows, capable of cleaving through a Roman helmet or severing a limb in a single strike. Roman armor had to be reinforced just to counter this deadly blade. One of the most ambitious projects of the war was Trajan's bridge. To secure a permanent crossing over the mighty Danube River, Trajan commissioned his chief architect Apollodorus of Damascus to build the longest bridge the ancient world had ever seen. For over a kilometer, massive stone piers supported a wooden superstructure, allowing Roman troops and supplies to cross the river regardless of the season or weather. It was an incredible feat of engineering, a symbol of Roman power and permanence. It sent a clear message to Decebalus: we are here to stay. Despite the Roman advance, Decebalus was not a man to sit and wait for the end. As winter approached in late 101 AD, he saw an opportunity. With the Roman army partially dispersed into winter camps and the Danube freezing over, he launched a daring and unexpected counterattack. He led a coalition of Dacian warriors and their allies, the Roxolani cavalry, across the frozen river into the Roman province of Moesia. His plan was brilliant. By threatening Roman territory, he hoped to force Trajan to withdraw his legions from Dacia to defend the frontier. The surprise attack was initially successful. Roman garrisons were caught off guard, and the Dacians and their allies wreaked havoc across the province. Panic began to spread, but Trajan was a calm and decisive commander. Instead of pulling his main force out of Dacia, he personally led a smaller mobile force sailing down the Danube to meet the threat head-on. The ensuing battle, fought in a freezing Mysian winter, was bloody and desperate. The Romans, led by their emperor, fought with grim determination. They eventually managed to repel the invasion, but at a high cost. This winter campaign showed Trajan just how resilient and dangerous his opponent truly was. Decebalus was not just a barbarian chieftain, he was a brilliant strategist. With the threat in Moesia neutralized, Trajan renewed his push towards the Dacian capital in the spring of 102 AD. The fighting was relentless and brutal. The Romans had to assault and capture a series of heavily defended hill forts that guarded the approaches to Sarmasagothesa. Each fortress was a bloody siege, with Roman siege engines bombarding the walls while legionaries stormed the ramparts. The Dacians defended their homeland with incredible ferocity, fighting for every inch of ground. The famous Adamclisi monument, which Trajan later built to commemorate the campaign, depicts scenes of intense graphic violence, showing the true gruesome nature of these battles. Finally, after a series of hard-fought victories, Trajan's legions cornered a large Dacian army at the Battle of Typai. Here, in a more conventional battle, the superior discipline and tactics of the Roman legion prevailed. As the Dacian army was crushed, with his main force shattered and the Romans closing in on his capital, Decebalus knew he was defeated, for now. He sent envoys to Trajan to sue for peace. The terms were harsh. Decebalus was allowed to remain king, but only as a client of Rome. He had to tear down his fortresses, surrender all his Roman-made war machines and engineers, and align his foreign policy with that of the empire. Dacia was effectively a vassal state. Trajan returned to Rome in triumph, celebrating a hard-won victory. He had expanded the empire's influence and secured the Danube frontier. But he knew, and Decebalus knew, that this was not the end. The peace was fragile. The First Dacian War was merely the opening act of a larger drama. Decebalus, the proud and unbroken king, would not remain a subject for long. He would soon begin to rearm and defy Rome, setting the stage for an even bloodier Second War that would ultimately decide the fate of Dacia and its indomitable king. The story of the First Dacian War is a saga of two legendary leaders, Trajan and Decebalus, locked in a struggle for survival and supremacy. It's a tale of incredible engineering, brutal guerrilla tactics, and the sheer will of an empire against the fierce spirit of a kingdom defending its home. So why did the war stop? Trajan needed time. His army was tired, his best general was killed, and his supply lines were a nightmare. He called it a peace, but it was a lie. Made Decebalus call himself a client king, an ally of Rome. Decebalus had to give back Roman prisoners and destroy his forts. In return, Rome would give him money and engineers. This is the great betrayal. Decebalus took Rome's money and used it to prepare for the next war. He was playing for time, and Trajan, the great emperor, let him. Why? Because Trajan was also playing for time. He was not just rebuilding his army, he was planning something much, much bigger. He understood that his first war was a failure. He had been arrogant, The next war would be different. Next war would be about total destruction. Peace was just a pause before the final, deadly act. Decebalus thought he had outsmarted Rome, but he had just given Trajan the perfect excuse to do what he had wanted to do all along, to erase Dacia from the map. The peace treaty was not a solution, it was a trap. And Decebalus, the brilliant strategist, walked right into it. 3 years later, Trajan was ready. After 3 years, Trajan was all set. He was super clever. Using Decebalus's secret rearming as a reason to stir up war, used Decebalus's secret rearming as the reason for war. He accused the Dacian king of breaking the treaty. Emperor Trajan had secured a victory, but the Dacian king, Decebalus, was far from broken. He was a proud and cunning leader, and he wasn't about to let Rome dictate his kingdom's fate. This peace treaty? For him, it was just a temporary setback, a chance to rearm and regroup. And rearm he did. Decebalus spent the next few years violating nearly every term of the treaty. He rebuilt his fortresses, welcomed Roman deserters into his army, and started pressuring neighboring tribes to join his cause against the Roman giant. He was playing a dangerous game, openly defying the most powerful empire in the world. For Trajan, this was an insult he couldn't ignore. The message from Dacia was clear: this fight wasn't over. So, in the year 105 AD, just 3 years after their first conflict, Trajan decided it was time to settle the score once and for all. The Second Dacian War was about to begin. This time, Trajan wasn't just aiming for a treaty. He was aiming for total conquest. He assembled a massive invasion force, even larger than the one from the First War. We're talking about 13 legions, plus auxiliary units, totaling well over 150,000 men. This was one of the largest Roman armies ever gathered for a single campaign. To support this immense force, Trajan had already commissioned a masterpiece of engineering during the brief peace: a magnificent stone bridge across the Danube River. Designed by the legendary architect Apollodorus of Damascus, this bridge was a symbol of Rome's power and permanence. It allowed troops and supplies to cross the wide, turbulent river with ease, eliminating a major logistical hurdle that had plagued them in the First War. The bridge was a statement. Rome was here to stay. The war began with a swift and overwhelming Roman advance. With the Danube Bridge securing his supply lines, Trajan pushed deep into Dacian territory. The strategy was different this time. Instead of a single, direct assault on the capital, Sarmizegetus Regia, the Romans launched a multi-pronged attack. One column of troops pushed through the mountains from the west, while another advanced from the east, systematically capturing and destroying the network of hill forts that protected the Dacian heartland. The Dacians, though fighting fiercely on their home turf, were simply outmatched and outnumbered. One by one, their strongholds fell. The intricate defensive system that had served Decebalus so well in the First War was being methodically dismantled. The final act of this epic struggle was the siege of Sarmizegetus Regia, perched high in the Aristi Mountains. The Dacian capital was a formidable fortress, a symbol of their culture and resistance. The Romans surrounded the city and began a relentless siege. They built siege engines, battered the walls, and cut off the city's water supply by finding and destroying the terracotta pipes that fed its cisterns. The desperation inside the walls must have been immense. The defenders, facing starvation and thirst, fought with the courage of cornered lions, but the end was inevitable. As the Romans finally breached the walls, the Dacian nobles, choosing death over capture, famously held a final feast where they drank poison. The city was then sacked and razed to the ground. The heart of the Dacian kingdom had been ripped out. But what about Decebalus? The defiant king managed to escape the fall of his capital with a small group of loyal followers. He fled eastward, hoping to rally other tribes and continue the fight from the mountains. But Roman cavalry were hot on his heels, relentless in their pursuit. The chase is famously depicted on Trajan's column. See the Roman horsemen closing in on the fugitive king. Finally, cornered and with no hope of escape, Decebalus made his last stand. Rather than face the humiliation of being paraded through Rome in chains, he took his own life. A Roman cavalryman named Tiberius Claudius Maximus, who claimed to have reached him just as he died, severed his head and brought it back to Trajan. The presentation of Decebalus' head to the Roman army marked the definitive end of the war and the Dacian kingdom. With the death of its king and the destruction of its capital, Dacia ceased to exist as an independent nation. The region was formally annexed and became the Roman province of Dacia Traiana. This was a hugely significant addition to the empire. Dacia was rich in resources, especially gold and silver mines. The spoils from the conquest were staggering. It's said that Trajan brought back so much gold that it allowed him to eliminate taxes for Roman citizens for a year and fund a massive public building program in Rome, the most famous part of which was Trajan's Forum with its incredible columns celebrating his victory. To secure the new province, Trajan initiated a massive campaign of Romanization. He encouraged tens of thousands of colonists from all over the empire to settle in Dacia, bringing with them the Latin language, Roman laws, and their way of life. This influx of people fundamentally and permanently changed the region's culture and demographics. In fact, the modern Romanian language is a direct descendant of the Latin spoken by these settlers, making it a unique Romance language in Eastern Europe, a lasting legacy of Trajan's conquest. The story of the Dacian Wars is more than just a tale of military conquest. It's a story of two powerful leaders, Trajan and Decebalus, whose ambitions clashed and reshaped a corner of the world. It's a story of incredible engineering, brutal warfare, and the birth of a new Roman province whose legacy endures to this day. The fall of Dacia represents the Roman Empire at its absolute peak, a testament to its military might, logistical genius, and its power to absorb and transform entire civilizations. The treasures from Dacia fueled a golden age in Rome, and the story of its fall is forever etched in stone on one of Rome's most enduring monuments. What do you think is the most fascinating aspect of this conflict? Back in Rome, it was the greatest celebration in history. Trajan was hailed as Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. The Dacian gold was so immense it funded the empire for over a century. Rome had reached its absolute peak, its size, its wealth, its power. It was the zenith. But was it? This victory was a fatal mistake in the long run. The new province of Dacia was difficult to defend, a constant drain on money and soldiers. The wars had also emptied the Roman treasury before the gold even arrived. Most importantly, the brutal destruction of Dacia created a power vacuum. New, more aggressive tribes moved into the area, tribes that would one day help bring about the fall of Rome. The zenith of Rome was also the moment it began its slow, long decline. Trajan's Dacian Wars were a masterpiece of military power and a testament to one man's ambition. But they were also a story of a terrible price paid for glory, a story of how a victory can sometimes be a hidden disaster. So what was the final legacy of this brutal war? Did Rome destroy Dacia completely? The answer is no. While the Dacian elite was killed or taken as slaves, many of the common people remained. The Romans colonized the new province with veterans and settlers from all over the empire. Over time, the Dacian people and the Roman colonists mixed together. They created a new culture, learned to speak Latin, which over centuries became the modern Romanian language. The people of Romania today are the living descendants of both the Dacians and the Romans. The province of Dacia itself did not last. About 170 years later, the Roman army had to leave Dacia forever, under pressure from new invaders. The land that Trajan fought so hard to take was lost. But the people and a part of their identity remained. The story of Trajan and Decebalus is not just a story of war. It's the story of the birth of a nation. It proves that even in total defeat, a spirit can survive. The Dacian spirit survives, so now we want to hear from you. This is a complex story with no easy heroes or villains. Was Trajan a hero who expanded Rome to its greatest glory? Or was his ambition a fatal mistake that weakened the empire? And what about Decebalus? Is he a brave freedom fighter or a dangerous warmonger? Go to the comments section below and tell us what you think. Let's have a discussion. Who do you think was in the right? If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's most fascinating conflicts, and you want to discover more hidden truths behind the great empires of the past, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more documentaries just like this one. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe.